Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm going to be doing a report on the Sun's transit through Pisces, beginning on the 18th of February and finishing on the 20th of March when the Sun moves into Aries and starts a whole new cycle. And outline the key themes of this period so we can make best use of it and understand what is going on inside of us during this month. So, with Pisces, it's the final sign of the zodiac, so it deals with endings as such. But with endings, remember that whatever we bring to the now makes space for new beginnings. So endings and beginnings are interlinked. Anything that has a beginning has an end, and endings often precursor to new beginnings. So with Pisces, part of this is learning to let go of things which we may have cherished for a long time, but they don't actually belong in our lives anymore. They served a purpose for a time, but we've changed over time as well, and as such the new version of who we are now doesn't require the things from the past. Now the energy of Pisces is difficult to describe because it's basically got a spiritual essence, but they're the things that the rational mind can't put a label to. I mean, there's basically saying that whenever you try to describe a spiritual experience to someone, the act of trying to put it into words causes some of the essence of it to be lost, so it no longer holds the same feeling that we had when we first experienced it. So with Pisces, it's difficult to put into words what it's about, because as soon as you try to describe it as one thing, it changes to something else. So part of the lesson of Pisces, if you like, is learning to let go of identification with labels. It's to not try to reduce everything to words. It's to learn to experience things as they are. And Pisces energy can also be about chaos, but chaos and order are interrelated. If there's no chaos, how do you define order? Because the two are interrelated, but chaos is also necessary because it dissolves old forms in order to release the essence from it so that new forms can be brought into being. So there are points in our life when we may need to embrace chaos, if only for a short period, but because that chaos is breaking down structures in our lives which no longer serve us and are actually limiting us and holding us back. The chaos removes the old in order to make space for a new form of order to take place, and preferably a higher level of order. So it's that discord you get just before something that has a greater degree of harmony emerges. Pisces is also the ruler of the 12th house, and the 12th house is a complicated one to explain. I mean, it's the unconscious, but it's got different levels or different layers to it. I mean, Pisces, like all the other signs, has a positive and a negative aspect to it. Now, the positive side is one that we typically experience through things like meditation and reflecting on things like love, compassion, empathy, and seeking to incorporate it into us. So there's, on the one hand, that emotional desire for union, that urge to merge with something greater than the self, and on the other there's the egoic fear of losing our identity or losing who we are. But the only bit that gets dissolved is the ego, not the soul. We don't lose who we are, we just lose our egoic understanding of who we are, because Pisces is about dissolving the ego and making it permeable to new insights, permeable to spirit, and permeable to universal love. The ego is based on separation, so if we try to go through Pisces living from the ego, then we may experience a lot of chaos, a lot of confusion. And Pisces also deals with things like addictions. So these are addictions at the end of the day where we're trying to achieve a feeling of a high sense of consciousness without us using substances or substitutes, rather than actually going through the process of raising our vibration, raising our consciousness. So with Pisces, the shadow side of it is addictions. This could be addiction to hard substances, it could be addiction to person, i.e. codependency. For a lot of us, it'd be addiction to sugar, because sugar modifies our brain chemistry briefly and achieves that sense of altered state of consciousness, But as we know, we also get a sugar crash afterwards, like any other drug. And the crash is worse than the initial feeling of euphoria that we got. So with Pisces, part of the thing we need to face and acknowledge within ourselves is, where do we engage in addictive tendencies because for whatever reason we don't feel we're worthy of that universal love that is there for anyone to connect to? Because that's what we're essentially seeking. We're seeking that sense of unity, but going through different substances instead. But eventually the body and the mind achieves greater tolerance to these substances and takes more and more in order to get that same feeling of dissolved boundaries. However, if we use meditation on the other hand, and meditation comes in various forms, so with meditation it's important we don't use too narrow a definition with meditation. Some people achieve meditative states just by walking, some people do sit down in the traditional ways, so sitting down, hands in certain mudras, etc. But we're all wired differently, and meditation can come in various forms. But anytime that we essentially disidentify from the mind or disidentify our thoughts and learn to view things from that witness perspective, that's meditation. But it doesn't have to be done through a very specific methodology. Whatever we do that brings us out of our normal way of thinking and into a more expanded experience, and do that. I mean, spending time in nature can help to facilitate this, because nature only operates in the present moment. Nature doesn't care about past or future, it just is. So with Pisces, it's a time for going inwards and looking at things that we've brought along with us so far, but we can actually let go of it. So it's letting go of old burdens, letting go of old emotional attachments, old addictive tendencies, and having the courage to surrender to a higher power and let that power flow through us and guide us to what we should be doing. Because Pisces is also about dreaming. It's about the way the mind goes into the collective unconscious and identifies dreams that we want to make manifest. So it's a time of figuring out what we want to do for the next growth cycle. So as soon as the sun goes into Aries, that's a time for initiating new beginnings and taking action. So it's important that we do the work at Pisces of identifying what it is that we actually want to achieve, where do we want to be a years from now, and from that we can then take action based on it when the ego is reborn. But if we don't identify what it is that we want to be doing, then we set ourselves up at a disadvantage for the next astrological cycle. So during this time, it's a time for spending time with ourselves, of engaging in things like meditation, if you like yoga or anything like that, programs do that, or anything that achieves a meditative state without relying on having to ingest a substance or relying on codependent relationships. Is a time for spending time with ourselves, of focusing on connecting with universal love, connecting with compassion, connecting with empathy, and radiating that out to others. We first need to give that to ourselves. So we need to reach a point where we feel worthy of universal love. We feel worthy of the love of God, if you have a religious perspective or religious mindset. But for us to feel worthy of that, we have to be able to love ourselves. So this is a time for learning to show empathy and understanding towards ourselves first, and loving ourselves unconditionally. Because once we can do that, and we top ourselves up with that unconditional love, there comes a point where that universal love then overflows from us. So rather than draining ourselves by giving love to other people without topping ourselves up, if we can connect with universal love and give that to ourselves every single day, we can become a beacon of that love, where we're so full of universal love and unconditional love, it naturally flows out from us and affects the people around us, and they get a lift from that universal love. But the benefit of doing it this way, so through things like meditation and learning to love ourselves unconditionally and give that love to ourselves whenever we're struggling, that love fills us to the point that's overflowing, and then that overflowing love is what radiates out to other people rather than our own reserves of it. So we don't get drained by helping other people, and they get an energetic lift through being in our presence. They can feel that compassion, that empathy. And obviously some people don't feel comfortable in that. They're so heavily conditioned to believe they're not lovable, or that they don't deserve compassion and kindness, that they reject it and engage in destructive behaviours to try and push us away. And if that's where someone is, that's where they are. We can't force someone to heal or anything like that. So another aspect of this, I mean, we have Neptune and Pisces and Chiron, in Pisces at the moment. The Chiron will be moving out in a couple of months' time, but Neptune in Pisces is really strengthening this energy, because Neptune rules Pisces, so the Piscean energy is almost squared at the moment. It's a lot more intense than normal, so it means that we have an opportunity that won't come around again for another almost 150 odd years after Neptune's left Pisces. So we need to use this energy now, but make sure it's going towards truth and not illusion. We're using it to achieve greater spiritual strength through loving ourselves, being kind to ourselves and one another, and giving the fruits of the Spirit to each other. So if we embrace universal love, then things like compassion, kindness and patience and gentleness and humility come a lot more easily. But we have to engage the process ourselves. We have to choose to do it. It's not forced upon us. We have to use this transit consciously by observing our own thoughts, observing our own inner responses to things, and recognising where there's an emotional attachment somewhere to a certain way of being that we feel threatened in as environments, and letting those attachments go so that we become more free to love unconditionally, less tied back by fear, and less likely to engage in addictive tendencies, because the universal love that we're seeking through, or the altered states of consciousness that we seek through substitutes, is being met through being connected with that unconditional love, through that universal consciousness, the Godhead, God and Goddess, whatever word you feel comfortable with. But if we have that connection naturally, then a lot of the addictive tendencies naturally fade with time. But it's something that we have to work on every single day. It's not a one-time deal. So whilst this is a key time of the year to learn it, it's something we should be practicing every day anyway. Because we've experienced Pisces briefly every single month when the moon's going through it. When the sun's here, it's our identity having an opportunity to be dissolved, so that a more soul-based identity emerges. But we have to be willing to let the ego dissolve, and this is often uncomfortable, because if we've attached our identity to our ego rather than our soul, when it's being dissolved, we may experience that as an identity crisis. But it's not us being dissolved, it's just our thought patterns and the conditioned self. But there's a universal self, the higher self, the soul, whatever word you feel comfortable with, and that's where we need to be operating from. And if we can connect with it and feel love for ourselves and love for one another, then we can become beacons of love and compassion to others without being drained by interaction with people who are suffering. We are able to have sufficient detachment while still caring, that we can give a person compassion and love. We don't take on that other person's burdens. We're not trying to be their saviour. We're just a comforting presence that allows them to express their pain, allows them to express their discomfort, and gives them an option to heal from it if they choose to. But we can't make anyone heal if they're not ready to. They have to be in the right place to do that. But we can, through connecting with the Piscean energy of unconditional love, of surrendering to the old to let new things emerge naturally, and through embracing greater empathy and compassion, we can help other people just by being in their space, even if we don't take any direct action. Helping that person, just being a compassionate and empathetic presence and radiating universal love to ourselves and others, can help facilitate changes. But it's not something we can force, it's something we have to allow it, because Pisces specialises in surrender. It's coming to terms with endings, accepting endings, and recognising that they're the precursor to beginnings. So this is a time for wrapping up the last astrological cycle, of letting go of what we don't need to take into the next one, and remembering to love ourselves throughout and love others as well. But the relationship with ourselves is the one that we have to transform through dissolving egoic conditions which lead to conditional love or lead to fears, and let go of those so that we become that beacon of unconditional love for others. So there's a lot of opportunity here for us to transcend our current understanding of who we are and our relationship with the world. It's a great chance for us to feel that sense of oneness with each other, but we have to approach it consciously and engage in things like meditation to facilitate that, rather than relying on other people to do the work for us or to create that feeling for us. We all have to connect with spirit and remember our spiritual origins, because we're all spiritual beings having a human experience, and if we can remember our spiritual self and operate from there, then we can help uplift the people around us by virtue of radiating unconditional love, unconditional compassion, empathy, and greater psychic sensitivity, so we can recognise when someone's in pain, and through that we can then show them compassion. If they accept it, great. If they don't, then we're better off just moving on, accepting that that person isn't ready to receive love, and that's okay. That's just where they are. It's not our place to judge them. We can only work on ourselves really and be a helping presence for others. So I hope that's a useful guide for the Sun in Pisces. May it bring you a lot of transformation, greater degrees of unconditional love, and may this be a time for letting go of the old to make space for whatever new beginnings, new projects that we each want to set for ourselves for the next astrological cycle. So take care, may you be blessed.